Beautiful, and welcome everyone to another Jackson Securities webinar. I'm joined by Managing Director Stephen Turner of Pivotal Metals. We're very lucky to have him on board today. Obviously, they've had some very exciting announcements come out, and we look forward to hearing a bit of a presentation. As always, returning viewers and new viewers, if you would like to submit a question, please wait till the very end. We'll have about a 10 to 15 minute time slot where you'll be able to send those through and obviously answer those. But Stephen, thank you very much. I understand it's a very early morning for yourself. Thank you for joining myself on this today. But how's your start to the morning today?
Thank you, Lachlan. No, it's good. It's not too early. It's 7 o'clock here, so it's a good start to the day. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what we'll do, we'll start by going into the presentation set up today. And as I said, if you have any questions, you have a little questions tab just on the right there. Submit those and we'll go through those at the end. But Stephen, if you wouldn't mind just taking us away.
Okay, thank you very much, Lachlan, and welcome everybody to this webinar on Pivotal Metals. So Pivotal Metals is a company that is listed on the ASX under the ticker PVT. It's had its name changed fairly recently. It was known previously as Rafaela Resources. Pivotal Metals, the name has been changed as we turn to focus more and more on those metals pivotal to the transition to a sustainable economy. So we think it's a name that's reflective of the direction of the company. And I'll just take you through the changes we've made over the last 12 months, where we think we've built up a very, very exciting portfolio, and I'd like to take you through some of those developments. Okay, so we'll start off with, first of all, the disclaimer, which we need to run through, and then we'll come on to now the investment case as a quick summary. So for Pivotal Metals, we think we're a company that presents investors with an exciting array of metals at the right time in a changing economy that's focusing more and more on sustainable energy. So we have now built up in Quebec, a tier 1 mining jurisdiction, a portfolio of 2 very exciting projects. These include a large deposit called Horden Lake, which I'll go into more detail on. And over the next 12 months, we have a number of price catalysts which we believe are going to really demonstrate the value of these projects. And with that, we believe we present a very clear strategy and one that can demonstrate a way through to increase shareholder value. Quick overview of Pivotal Metals. We have an experienced board. We've recently added Dan Rose to the board, who brings a lot of financial experience in the commodity sector. And we have a decent cash balance following our raise at the end of last year. But nevertheless, our enterprise value remains what we think significantly undervalued. All right, and management own around 3% or so of the company, and most of that has been through continued investment by members of the board at each fundraise. So the management are heavily invested in this company, having subscribed throughout the numerous raises in the past. ESG for us is a strong focus. We started off in Spain. In Spain, it is as in anywhere in Europe where there's a much greater density of population, the environment and social side has a heightened focus with many mines near developed areas. So we have always been very cognizant of the stakeholder requirements and concerns. And in fact, I think our recent announcement about the award of the water permit for San Finks is a demonstration of our commitment to the environmental and social governance, in the sense that that has been approved in a mine in an area that has had a number of concerns raised in the past. Now, in the case of Canada and Horden Lake, we're extremely fortunate that the project is located 18 kilometers off a main road that has high voltage power lines running along it from a hydroelectric dam to the north, which means that we have the ability to develop Horden Lake as a carbon neutral development as we go forward, demonstrating our continued commitment to the environment. So I'm going to focus initially on Horden Lake. Horden Lake is our flagship project now. It's one we acquired on the 20th of December last year. We announced it back in September, and we managed to go out and raise the funding late last year to complete that acquisition and give us some additional cash balance for moving forward. Part of that process, we went back into the original data, which we're extremely fortunate to benefit from. And we're able to rerun a detailed mineral resource estimate under JORC and determined that there was a 28 million ton pit constrained resource at about 1.5% copper equivalent. So it's a sizable resource containing copper, nickel, and platinum group elements. And I'll come into that in a little more detail, but it's a very exciting project for us, and one that I think going forward we should see grows tremendously with some excellent forward news. So the location, as I mentioned, is 18 kilometers off the road that runs from the La Grande power station. It's located with access to various smelters. Its benefits in that road that runs close to us, the St. James Bay Highway, has recently benefited from an upgrade, a $300 million upgrade, in which there's fiber optic cables and the high voltage lines run along there. So we have access to some green energy as well as access to technology through those fiber optic cables. So it's very well positioned now with some extra infrastructure nearby. I will touch on a few of the cross sections later, but I think the important thing here is you can see that the project is located well within the claims that we own 100% of, and that there's extensive drilling, 52,000 meters of drilling. Now, what is important to note is in that drilling, this is a project that was discovered in the 1960s by Inco, and they did 32,000 meters of drilling back then, focused initially on nickel and copper. And therefore, we do not have assays for the multi-elements across the entire drill base. So they discovered the resource, they drilled it out, and then subsequent drilling campaigns in 2008 and 2012 started focusing on the multi-elements. Those drilling campaigns were more in the northeast, where you can see the greater density of drilling. So therefore, when we ran the mineral resource estimate, we were able to include palladium, gold in that resource. However, we were not able to include cobalt or cobalt or silver in that resource, as we simply didn't have enough data points. And in fact, in the gold, we are only able to ascribe gold across about 40% of the resource. So what that means is an awful lot more of precious metals within this resource, which are not yet included in the resource estimate. And that provides some immediate upside for us as we move forward. So this is the grade tonnage curve of the resource, which was released back in November. It's a 42 million ton resource, but we applied some economics around that, which I'll show in the next slide, which came out with the 28 million ton pit constrained resource. But just a quick look at some of the composition of that resource. You can see that there's, it's dominated largely by copper and then nickel, and then you see the palladium and gold sitting there at lower values, but we expect that gold to increase substantially. In fact, the gold should probably sit pretty much alongside where the palladium is. So we have 66,000 ounces of gold in our resource, but it only covers 40%. So if you gross that up, it'd be about 165,000 ounces of gold, which more or less matches the amount of palladium that we have in the resource at 167,000 ounces. So a lot more value is yet to come. And here is the pit constrained resource. You can see the resource quite interesting. It goes down about 200 meters at the northeast, 600 meters in the middle, about 300 meters deep in the southwest. It has 55% of the overall resource sits in indicated and 45% in inferred, but much of that indicated sits within the pit. And then as you move outside the pit, it skews more and more to inferred and less to indicated. So the pit itself is pretty well defined, and what we will be intending to do going forward is a drill campaign that will target those southeast areas, as I mentioned, that have not yet included many of the precious metal credits. We'll also be stepping into putting some deeper holes down that will target some high grade areas, and that will help us to probably add both tonnage and overall grade equivalent to the resource as we move through a PFS that we intend to complete over the next 12 months. One other thing that we're very fortunate is that we were able to get hold of an initial metallurgical test work report. It was done by RDI, and that was done off the 2012 drilling, and it was able to support many of the assumptions we've made on the recoveries, but obviously more work needs to be done, but what it's done is help point us in the right direction as to where we should be testing going forward. Here's one of those cross sections. This is one from Inco. The resource sits at a very comfortable 55-degree angle, which makes it potentially amenable to open pit mining. What we found is when we overlaid the pit constrained resource, or the pit shells, across the geological resource, we didn't lose too much tonnage because the angle of the resource sits comfortably within the angle of the pit walls. So quite a convenient shape for us, and should go a long way to reducing costs and improving recoveries as we look at development options. The resource sits along the contact of metasediments and ultramafic, with the highest grades right down in the metasediments, and we're seeing some extremely good grades, particularly when we look at the next slide. This is one done by El Condor in 2012, and this gives you an indication of the sort of the multi-element aspect of this resource, where we have been seeing grades of 200 to 500 parts per million cobalt. We've been seeing 20 to 40 grams per ton of silver, and these sort of numbers have yet to be incorporated into the resource estimate. Now I'm going to touch on another project that we have built up, which we think is extremely exciting, called the Belleterre-Anglaire project. That sits in the southwest of the Quebec province. It is early stage exploration, although it's had extensive drilling on it. It's had, just on the Midram resource claims alone, has had over 45,000 meters of drilling. So it's had extensive drilling over the years. The focus has always been on the shallow mineralization. So what we've seen is that there's been extremely high tenors, high grades of nickel and copper and platinum group elements in this exploration play. But all within about 200, 250 meters of depth. And when we acquired the initial claims back in 2020, what we found very attractive about this is that the shallow mineralization, we believe, is indicative of a much deeper feeder system. We had the opportunity in May of last year to double that position by the acquisition of the Alotta and Lorraine claims, which are adjacent to our Midram and LaForce claims. So we now have 157 square kilometers in this prolific, highly mineralized region. And as you can see, the Alotta, which are the last three holes, intercepts there, are very similar to the Midram. So again, showing high grade, shallow, and many of the anomalies identified in Midram extend through into the Alotta claims. So it was an extremely strategic and viable acquisition late last year. What we've done is we've benefited from extensive survey data. There's been VTEM flown across all of the Alotta and Lorraine back in 2019, and we did our own VTEM on Midram and LaForce in 2021. We've taken that data and re-looked at it. We've used SRK Exploration, and they've done some quite extensive review, and we've identified a number of new anomalies, 137 new anomalies at depth, with 20 of these being high priority. So we think this is very exciting, and that's going to be the focus of our work this year as well. I know shareholders have been waiting for us to do something on this. What we've done is a lot of desktop work to really narrow in. A lot of people in the past have put numbers of holes down and not really built up anything of any size. They've all been very small, high-grade pods. We're doing the homework up front to really try to vector or triangulate where we think these feeder systems could be coming from, and we'll be targeting those initially with some MT surveys, which can go down to about 1,200 meters and let us have a better view of those anomalies. So that will be the initial focus, but we've got some drill-ready targets as well, both in Midrum and Alota, as well as in Lorraine.
So Stephen, on a operational front, how are you managing these projects? Obviously, there's a lot of projects that you've got at the moment. How are you able to mitigate time towards all these projects at the same time? How are you managing that?
Okay, so on Horden Lake, we've been very fortunate. The previous owners used a company called Caracal Creek, and Caracal Creek ran the drill campaign in 2008 for a company called Southampton, and then they ran the 2012 drill campaign. They also wrote a 43101 compliant resource back in 2009. Okay, so this is a consultancy group in Canada that has been involved with the Horden Lake project since, actually dated back to 2002. We have engaged them, including the same people that were involved in that project all that time ago, and they sit on an awful lot of that data. So we engage them. They're extremely familiar with that project, and they've actually they ran the JORC resource for us. They redid the modeling, and they're currently working with us to put together that drill campaign. So they've designed the next drill holes in conjunction with our senior geologist, and they are now in the process of finalizing the engagement with a drilling contractor. They've worked with us to get the permits in place for the drilling, the forestry and wetlands permits in Quebec. And they're also helping to set up the temporary camp that's required in northern Quebec. So they have that experience of operating in the field in that area and know the project well. So that's Horden Lake. That's been extremely useful. On the BAGB assets, we've been using Oryx in Toronto. Oryx have also been associated with the Midrum LaForce and the Alota Lorraine, all the claims that we're working on. They've worked with them for many, many years with previous owners on those assets, and we've been engaging them. So what we haven't done is come in and try to, run this whole thing remotely. We've used those people that have been involved with these projects for many, many years to basically continue with their knowledge and experience in the region. So
Excellent.
That's how we've been managing so far. And that's what we're continuing to do, although we've also identified a number of people that will be looking to appoint a country manager. We're focusing very much on someone who can be based in Quebec, speaks French, and brings experience to the region. So we've been talking to a number of people, and we're looking to bring somebody on in the coming month or so. So there'll be someone on the ground who will manage those contractors.
Perfect.
Right. Okay, so let's touch on Spanish assets. Obviously, this has been previously the focus of the company. We built up, we think, quite an attractive portfolio of Santa Comba and San Finks. Santa Comba being the original project that we went into, and we did a lot of work around a open pit project, which we released the PFS for last year. These projects, both Santa Comba and San Finks, are historical underground mines. They have permits for underground mining. And so therefore they are partially permitted. The advantage of San Finks, it's got a process plant at site. It was producing as recently as 2017, and it was really waiting on the award of a water permit, which we announced this last week. That's finally been awarded to us. That's very good news, because what it does is it unlocks that mine. And so we have a restart plan that's been developed. And that restart plan, day one, was always on the award of the water permit. So we're now on day one of that restart plan, and so we're starting to enact the activities that are required to move that forward. Having said that, what we've done as a company is, we are a small company. Capital's very scarce for us, and we believe that the shareholder capital is better deployed focusing on Canada. We think there's tremendous upside, both in the Horden Lake resource and in the Bellachar-Anglaire exploration area. We see greater upside and greater transparency. Quebec is a tier 1 mining jurisdiction. It's got a lot of incentives in place for mining companies coming in. They've put budgets forward that see access to capital. We've got a flow-through share scheme in Canada that allows us to access capital specifically for exploration work at extremely favorable rates. So we believe that Canada is a better focus for the shareholders when we've got limited capital to deploy. And as a result of that, we have shifted our focus to Canada, and Spain is no longer as core to us as it was. And what we're in discussions, have been in discussions now for several months with various parties that like what we've done in Spain. They like the portfolio we put together. They like the opportunity of an integrated Sandfinks Santa Comba type operation. And these are parties that invest in Europe, and they'd be looking to put capital in. So the idea here is that we won't be asking shareholders for more funds to develop these projects. All shareholder funds going forward will be deployed to Canada, and we'll bring in third-party funding into Santa Comba and Sandfinks. That third-party funding means we'll be divesting down. We're quite open as to what that means, so we'll either stay involved or not stay involved, depending upon what sort of discussion, how the discussions advance over the coming months. So, an attractive portfolio, but one that we think is better advanced by a third party, whilst we focus on Canada, where we see greater upside for the shareholders, and also in a range of commodities, which I think are better understood by the market as well.
Excellent.
So that leads us on to the 2023 program. So we've got around 8,000 meters of drilling. We've got about 7,300 or so of it is on Horden Lake, and 500 plus on the Belatar-Anglaire. So a fairly limited drilling campaign in the Belatar-Anglaire area. Really, the focus there being more the MT surveys initially. We will then be commencing as we do that drill work in Quebec. We'll be engaging a lab in Vancouver, which we've lined up to run our metallurgical test work. We'll be taking out specific core from Horden Lake and doing test work to work on the process flow sheet going forward. We're also going to be commencing some environmental baseline studies. That tends to be the long lead item as you take a project through to development. In Canada, sometimes you need up to 18 months of study work, so we'll be kicking that off early. As I mentioned, on the BAGB exploration, we're doing the MT surveys and some limited drilling. And then on the corporate side, one of the advantages of going to Quebec, as I mentioned, is the flow-through share scheme. We do have a healthy cash balance at the moment, but we will require more going forward to meet this program. So the money that we'd be looking to access in the year will be dedicated to going in the ground in Canada through a very tax-efficient process. In Quebec, you have the highest uplift on any flow-through share issuance. At the end of last year, you're getting around 2 to 1. So for every dollar you raise, you're getting 2 that you could put into the ground. This is much, much more efficient for us than raising standard equity. And therefore, as a consequence, is much less dilutive for our existing shareholders and allows us to invest properly into this program going forward. So we've engaged Red Cloud Securities in Canada that specialize a boutique mining company with significant experience in this type of fundraising, and we're already starting that marketing to raise the awareness of Pivotal in Canada to help us access some of these funds as we go forward, so we can meet that program over the next 12 months. Okay, so that's the program. We think there's a lot of excitement there, and then of course, we do expect some announcement at some point over the coming months as well around Spain and how we're going to be moving forward with that portfolio.
Excellent.
So that is Pivotal Metals. There's a quick summary at the end. We think there's a lot of excitement for shareholders. Horden Lake is large, quite advanced. We're moving forward through to a PFS. There are comparables out there that indicate that we've managed to get this at a very good value, and there's significant value yet to be recognized in the shareholder in the shares. And then the BAGB we think is really very exciting going forward as well, and that's where we want to apply our capital, and that's where we think we're going to see some tremendous returns for shareholders going forward.
Beautiful. Well, once again, viewers, if you would like to submit some questions, we're happy to answer live from the audience at the moment. But we already got some email submissions already with regards to everything that's been going on in Pivotal Metals. One of the first registrations we got actually sent through an email asking with regards to success rate of the Horden Lake and other mines around the area. Is there a bit more insight that you could give us with regards to a few of your neighbours and how they're been tracking at the moment?
Yeah, there are mines being developed in the region. As we've gone through the permitting, it's been highlighted that there are a number of mines being developed in the region that have just obtained permits and actual development permits. So not just the forestry and wetlands permits, but actually getting mining applications approved. We've seen in Quebec that there has been a very proactive approach taken by the government to the mining. We do have to be cognizant of environmental considerations. We are in an area that we need to be careful going forward. We're in a wetlands area, but we've already got our wetlands permit. We got that through quite quickly, so we're not seeing any issues at the moment that would cause us any concern. When we've looked and investigated into where to invest our capital going forward, Quebec came through very strongly for us as a place that's pro mining and very supportive. And in fact, you'll see the budgets are focused very much around critical metals in Quebec, which we are in, and even more so in the north of Quebec. So there are additional incentives for developing in the north, which is exactly where we are. So we are in an area that benefits from some of the most attractive incentives to be found.
Yep. We've got a question here from Tony. He's asked, obviously, capital needs to be raised later on down the track. My question today is, with your current burn rate, when are you expected to be issuing this, and what sort of achievements do you want to be having before we actually do this?
Well, for us, the flow-through share scheme is more about timing. The earlier you do it, the better, because the flow-through share scheme works that once you've raised the money, you've got the rest of the year plus one more year to do the raise. So you have to apply it for expiration. So the earlier you do it in the year, the more time you have to spend the money. Any money raised through a flow-through share scheme is ring-fenced for expiration activities. You cannot use it for other activities within the company. The sooner we raise it, the longer we have to spend it. But also, what we are keen to do is not engage too quickly in this expiration activity until we've secured flow-through share funding, because as I mentioned, that's a lot more tax efficient. Every dollar we use at the moment on our exploration work costs us $1. Once we got the flow-through shares in place, effectively every dollar we spend costs us 50 cents. Okay, so the sooner we get that money in place to cover the full budget, the better. So our focus at the moment is getting the story out, getting people to understand that any capital raised through the flow-through share scheme will be deployed on hugely accretive activities. There's a pretty clear program going forward on two very exciting projects. So yeah, this is not something we're going to leave to the end of the year, because that would be tax inefficient and also much more dilutive for shareholders.
Absolutely. We've got one more question here, but ladies and gentlemen, if you want to send them through, we haven't got much time left, but we've got a question here from Tracy. She asks, obviously there's been a change from Spain to more Canada focused. What's the more geological differences, more or less, with issues with regards to topography that you have to deal with more so than where we were before?
Okay, well, there's quite significant differences between them. I mean, first of all, in Spain, Santa Comba is fairly flat, and that's a brownfield. There's an existing quarry there and operations. We have operations ongoing there at the moment, but it's fairly flat, but it is located close to a town, 7 kilometers away is the Santa Comba town. So it's got very good infrastructure in place, 60 kilometers to deepwater port. In the case of San Finks, also close to port, Santa Comba and San Finks are 50 kilometers apart, but San Finks is a much hillier area, is closer to the coast, and sits again close to towns. So a very different scenario to Canada, which the Horden Lake project is really quite remote, and in fact, it was discovered in the 1960s. It was only accessed by float plane or helicopter. Obviously, that's changed with the St. James Bay Highway in place, but it is a very flat, very flat terrain. In fact, if we go back, there's a picture of it, of the terrain. Here we go. It's extremely flat. As you can see, it's very densely wooded, but it is wetlands. It does mean that there are different styles of drilling through the year. In the winter, we have to put in a temporary track and drill on the frozen land, or if we drill outside the winter period, we need to go in by helicopters and drill. So there is it's a very different scenario, different type of topography, very different setup. We obviously have to deal with native First Nations as well in Canada, which we don't have to do anything similar in Spain. Having said that, the Horden Lake sits on Crown lands, so there's no issue there, although we will be using the local Cree to assist us with camp, mobile camps, etc., which we think is entirely appropriate.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. We do have one question at the moment that's just come through as we're just about to wrap up. So ladies and gentlemen, if you do want to send through your last final questions. This question is coming from Logan. He asks, do you see any further payment/financial obligation to Spain from the company?
Right, so what we are looking to do is those projects have a very defined plan going forward, particularly San Finks with the award of the water permit, a very defined schedule as to what we need to do over the coming months. It starts off relatively small, but does ramp up, but we'll be looking to bring in that funding ahead of any of that sort of financial expenditure. So again, the plan is from our side to bring in third-party funding without the requirement to go back to shareholders for additional capital. So any capital that we need to spend over the interim period will just come out of existing cash balance, but we're looking to minimize that as well as we look to close a deal as soon as we can around that funding for those projects so that we don't utilize funding that we want to direct more towards Canada.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Stephen, I think that we'll wrap it up right there. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you, Pivotal Metals. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any further questions and you felt like we didn't quite answer them, we'll try and send them through to Investor Relations at the moment. But thank you very much, Stephen, for turning up today. I'm Lachlan Callahan, the host today. Is there any final comments that you want to say to the investors before we leave?
No, look, obviously, thank you for those long-standing shareholders who've been patient with us. We think we now have a very extremely exciting portfolio in the right jurisdiction and the right commodities, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that capital is deployed there, and that we therefore offer tremendous upside for those who have been with us for a long time and also those that are coming in new. So, look, we think it's an exciting period over the next 12 months, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think we all look very excited towards that. Well, thank you, Stephen, once again. This has been a presentation by Port Jackson Securities. We look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Thank you all. Have a good one.
Thank you.